Awesome. Well, today we have Nichole Riley joining us on soft skills or hard skills. Thank you very much for being here, Nichole.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, a little backstory: Nichole and I both share some social groups, and so I've known her how long? Probably over 10 years, maybe. I
Oh,
mean,
probably 10 years now. Yeah.
and it's crazy. And so we've kind of crossed in terms of like Venn diagramming our lives a little bit personally, but not a
Yep.
ton. And then I kicked off this series this year and she reached out. She's like, "Hey, I'd love to be on this." And I'm like, "Oh, no brainer. Like this is exactly her expertise." So we're really happy to have her on the show. Just fantabulous experience. Starting with being a director and senior HR leader at Citi, the large global bank for 16
Yep.
years. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Started my career there.
Holy cow. And then you went over to Rabobank, another large global entity, and
Yep.
you were the chief human resources officer for all of North America.
Correct. Yep.
Then you were like, let's detour and go from working with the big and go down to working with a biotechnology startup company called Indigo. And of course, you were the
Yep.
chief people officer, much cooler title. Um, well, I'm just really excited to get into the weeds at some point and just hear about
Yeah.
leadership development, talent development from those
Yeah.
two different angles. And I don't want
Yeah.
to leave this out. And now Nichole owns and operates her own consulting firm called Elevate Executive Consulting as well. So,
Mhm.
again,
Yep.
thank you for being on the show. And if you don't mind, we can kind of dig in.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Perfect. So, just describe what you do, so like a young person, an eighth grader could understand it.
Yeah, it's funny because I think as an HR leader, yeah, my family doesn't understand what I do, right? Like it's hard to describe. I think a lot of people think, oh, you push paperwork and you
Yep.
deal with employees who get in trouble. And I've actually never done either of those things in my entire career. And really the way that HR has shaped over the last, decade or more is around leadership coaching, leadership consulting, making sure that the organization and businesses and teams are set up for success. How do we make sure that we have the right, culture, benefits, whatever that we need from a employer branding perspective to attract talent and then retain that talent. And once we have them, we want to keep them. How do we develop them to make sure that they're growing in their career as well?
I think that's so important. And for those that aren't familiar with the field of HR in general, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but from my
Yeah.
vantage point, traditionally, right, from the 20s, I'd say through the probably 2010s, HR was treated very substandard, in my opinion. It wasn't
Oh,
always
yeah.
given a
Yeah.
seat at the strategic business making table.
Yeah.
But I've seen that shift in, from my opinion as a
Shoot. Yeah.
consultant coach, which is a huge thing, because as you know,
Yeah.
no, the people are the business. So
Right.
if we're
Right.
not, you said, attracting, retaining, and developing our top talent, then we're not going to fulfill
Yeah.
our strategy no matter what it is.
Right. And it's really interesting to have gone through that transition as an HR leader because I came into the career about the time people were starting to get it, right? Like you were still fighting with leaders to get them to understand that there was a value add in working together, right? And I had some leaders that got it. And I had others that would just push back, like, why do you need to be here? What are you doing? And that still happens today, right? There are still organizations that, especially smaller, that they just want to do things the way they've done it. And they want you to, clack things into a system for them or push paper around. And but the bigger organizations or stronger organization with good leadership culture get it. And they do understand that you can't have the strategy without the culture, right? There's a really great quote from Peter Drucker that says, culture will eat strategy for breakfast, and it will every time. And it's really fun to see leaders, especially executive leaders, have that light bulb moment of, oh, wait, our strategy can be whatever we want it to be. But if we don't have the people driving it, we don't have the right people in the right place at the right time, it's for naught. And it's been really fun to go through that transition. And then I think the next stage has been since the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
HR's job has changed
Right.
dramatically since then.
Yeah, we've talked from our organization a lot with executive leadership teams especially looking to their HR professionals like, hey, right when COVID kicked off, what's the COVID playbook?
Yes.
And HR leaders
Yeah.
are like,
Yeah.
there isn't one. We're writing it as we
Yeah.
go. But I
Yeah.
really like what you were saying, the fact that you've been part of that, what I'd call a strategic transition in HR mindset for companies, like making them part of that conversation so that they got to help write that playbook in line with the business strategy, not apart from it.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And, we would say it was this like being at the table was the goal, right? Where now, if you talk to a lot of really strong HR leaders, we'll say we are the table,
Yeah.
right? Like you come to our table, we'll
I
we'll
like
run the
that.
business at this point. Like come and let's do it together. There's no table. And the COVID component, I joked all the time that I became a chief medical officer, right? Because
So true.
I wasn't, I didn't have a degree in public health, but those are the things that you did come together as a leadership team, and it was a bonding experience, and I think it was a growth experience for leaders at all levels because one, it humanized them, right? Which you talk about soft skills being hard skills, it's huge, and it challenged them with something that no one had experience in. No one. I mean, there wasn't a single person that any of us worked with who had been through a pandemic before.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it was interesting. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great framework, kind of macro. Let's dig in and
Yeah.
a little shameless self-promotion, right? So obviously I only want to talk to people who are top performers, who are on the cutting edge, who care, who research, who want to be on
Yeah.
shows like this. Like what makes you good at your job? And don't be shy, just be
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
makes you good at it?
I think a couple of things, and like you can probably appreciate this because I think we're similar in this way. I just say things how it is, right? I'm just very direct and very blunt, not in a mean way,
Right.
but in a direct way. And I think there's a lot of leaders that have been, danced around because they have been, they've grown quickly in their career, they've been successful, and so they've been a little bit untouchable, maybe. And I'm not scared by that. And so I think that is one thing. I think the other is that I really approach my job and I'm going to make you better sense when it comes to coaching, right? When it comes to soft skills and developing people. There's things that are much harder on the business acumen side and different things. But when I look at how I drive the people function and how we work with the business, it's about, transparency. It's about being able to give options, right? There's no right answer in some of this stuff, right? There's options that are better than others, but there's no concrete answer in a lot. This isn't math, right? It's not 2 + 2
Absolutely.
is 4. It's being able to come up with various options to achieve whatever that goal is that the business is trying to get to. And so directness, transparency, optionality. And I would say the last one is just really knowing the business, regardless of what industry I'm in, and really digging in and knowing what that is, and then being able to connect the dots of what's going on and what the downstream impacts would be of whatever decision we're deciding on.
Right.
And I think that's a real differentiator in my space in particular, because I think a lot of folks have been able to get to places in HR without having had to do that, where now it's table stakes. At least it is if you want to be on my team.
Right. Well, good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're bringing in so many things there, like understanding the trends in the field, the macro, the context that your business is operating in, being able to come out of the weeds and take a peek at that and then bring that knowledge back to your team. That's a differentiator from a good leader versus a great leader.
Yeah. I mean, and regardless of what function you're in, you want to be a CFO, you want to be a chief HR officer, you want to be the head of sales. It doesn't matter. These are all the things that are, I keep going back to our topic. These are all soft skills,
right?
You can be the best accountant in the world. It doesn't make you a great leader of accounting. And those are the things that you have to develop. It's the way you have to look at, how you grow your career. I've seen so many leaders or people who want to grow into leadership fail because they're technically very sound and they can't get there on the soft side.
How many times I've heard people quit a job because the software isn't working? Zero, right?
Zero.
How many times do they quit a job because their boss sucks, doesn't take the time to connect with them, doesn't listen to their ideas, doesn't know who they are, how to communicate with them all the time? Tell me this. I want to dig into this because, again, you've worked for some of the largest financial organizations in the world. And then also at a startup level, but still a large
Yep.
startup, I would say. Like,
Yep.
talk to me about that. What's HR look like from up there versus
Mhm.
startup world? What's similar? What's different?
But really, when you get down to the one-on-one and even at the business level of a, when I was at Citi, we were over 300,000 employees at one point, right? We got down to the 300,000 mark. Um, I was there when we went through the financial crisis. So obviously we shrunk a bit at that time and they continue to shrink, which they should. But the thing I would say is that one-on-one relationship with your CEO, with your business leaders, it's no different if you're at a 300,000 person organization or if you're in an 850 person organization. And I've been at both. I would say that at a smaller organization, you have the opportunity to get to know more people, a bigger percentage of the talent in the organization that you do at a larger. I would say from an HR perspective, your ability to focus on just the group that you're working with is different because a lot of the things like centralized benefits, centralized comp, all that stuff is taken care of in a different way, and you own it all at a smaller organization. But I would say, as a leader who's developing, regardless of the function, who wants to grow in a large organization like that, the pro is they're going to have a lot to help you develop, right?
Mhm.
You're going to get that at a large organization. The con is that often leaders get pigeonholed,
Mm.
right? Like
Yep.
if you start in finance, you're going to be in finance. Like that is what you're going to do. You want to make a change, very, very difficult to do
Mm.
for two reasons. One, there's just too many people to keep track of,
Right.
right? The second is that functions want to hoard their talent,
Of course.
in a large organization. And so I knew very few people at Citi out of 300,000 that moved functions.
Wow.
I did it once. Once I left HR for a period of time and ran customer experience. I came back into HR. I was the only one I knew who did that.
Wow. Wow.
And so
Interesting.
we're in a smaller organization. You can take talent for talent.
100%, especially in startup
Yeah,
mode.
yeah,
Everybody's a bit of a CEO, chief everything officer, wherever.
exactly,
And it's
exactly,
exciting and it's messy, right?
yeah,
But it's still fun.
totally,
But at some
yeah,
point, we have to scale and lay down some processes and procedures.
right,
And
right,
obviously, HR has a major position to play.
yeah,
Talk to me
yeah,
about that real quick. Self disclosure. I'm a bureaucratic minimalist. Okay. So whenever I can do
yeah,
that requires less rules for my businesses or my
yeah,
clients, I usually
yeah,
advocate that as a blanket.
yeah.
But talk a
Mhm,
little bit about where you think process and procedure can be useful from an HR standpoint,
mhm,
but also where it can be
yeah.
maybe a handicap.
I like to. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a minimalist. I've never thought of it in that term, but I probably am.
Mhm.
The way you're describing it, because I think where we tend to get it wrong is we want to design process, practice, policy for the rule breakers and not for the 90% of people that are going to follow the happy path.
Such a great
Um,
point. Repeat that
you
real
know,
quick. Please repeat that.
yeah,
It's so important.
yeah. So I think that we design policy, practice, whatever, for the 10% of people that will break the rules and not the 90% of people that will follow the happy path.
Yeah.
And I think if you treat the people in your organization like the adults that they are, and you stop trying to design for the exception, you will find yourself in a place, where employees want to be.
Yeah.
And they feel trusted and they feel like they can maneuver through the organization in the way that they want to. And so I don't know if that's considered maybe a bureaucratic
No.
minimalist, but I don't think we have to like tighten the screws on
Right.
employees. You
Right.
just don't have to. You're
Yeah.
going to have a bad seed always.
Yeah.
Every organization, you get 800 people together, somebody's going to be
Right. That's
trouble,
that's a
right?
microcosm of society.
Exactly. Exactly. You're going to have the person who doesn't want to do their job. You're going to have the person who's just, the jerk on the team.
Yep.
You're going to have those people. It's going to happen. You have 300,000 people. You're going to have a few thousand of those
Right.
people. It's going to happen. They're not all going to be on the same team. What's the loss to the organization in the long run is always my question. Like, okay, so what if somebody doesn't follow this policy? What if this doesn't happen? Like, what's the risk? It's a massive risk. That's different. If the risk is they take a few more vacation days than they were allotted, like,
Right. Are they
so
adding
be
value on those other
it.
days?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huge.
That's an interesting uh experiment that's going on right now, right? A lot of organizations are going to unlimited PTO.
Yep.
I'm for it. I say do it.
If you can be
50 more
productive and
days
get
is going
done
to
what
get
you need to
keep
get
you
done.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I,
So, um
I think
yeah.
we're both spoiled in one sense that we both like to learn. We both like people.
Yeah.
We both like working
Yeah.
with leaders who can make decisions, of
Yeah.
course. But then as a consultant, you get to see a lot of different organizations and what they're doing
Yeah.
right and
Yeah.
what they're not doing right and bring in best
Yeah.
practices, share those things. And
Yeah.
it's bittersweet because as a consultant, you get top shelf syndrome. You'll bring in a great idea, they'll put it on
Yes.
the top shelf and
Yep.
it'll sit there. And
Yep.
so you just got to get over that.
Yeah. It's top shelf syndrome, but I think it's also, for me, the thing I love about being in an organization is the the reward at the end, right? Not that everything has a beginning and an end, because we all know it just doesn't go that way. But so often as a consultant, you're also getting things kicked off and then walking away and hoping, that they
Right.
get to where they need to go or that it continues over time, knowing how it can benefit them. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different vibe for sure. But you do get to learn a lot in this space and being able to interact just with so many different types of organizations. But City was that as well. I was in 3 different businesses at City, and each of those would have been Fortune 500s on their own when I was there.
Dig in on that based on your unique
Yeah,
experiences as an HR leader
yeah,
and thought provider. What's your people
yeah,
philosophy? Like not in general, but in the workplace.
yeah,
How do you
yeah.
think about people? What are the principles that are important to you?
Well, one I think I've mentioned already is you treat them like adults,
Mm.
and I think organizations forget about that. They want to turn the screws. They want to treat them as though they own them or that they don't bring a logical working brain
Right.
into the workplace. And so I like to interact with the organization and the folks in it as though they are the adults that they are. The
Nice.
other principle is that everyone brings something to the organization. I don't care if they're sitting in the executive assistant's chair, if they're sitting in the CEO's chair. Everybody can learn from everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, hands down. And that is my personal approach to how I work throughout an organization. And that is a principle I bring. Um, the third one I would say is you have to know it's not just about people's talent, whether that be performance or potential. It is also about their desires. And that gets missed a lot. I'll sit in talent meetings with leaders and they'll be talking about somebody. Oh, well, I think they should do this. I think they should do that. And I'll ask, is that what they want to do?
Right.
And they'll be like, well, I don't know. Have you had that conversation with them? No, I haven't. Okay, well, then we don't know that this is the right box to put them
Right.
in or to
Yep.
develop them for. And so, their desires are huge. And when you look at the breakdown of an organization, regardless of size, right, you're going to have people that really love doing what they're doing and they're happy to do that. And I don't care if you call them A players, B players, C players, whatever it is. But those people that are, I would say, well matched in role,
Yep.
maybe whatever you want to call it in your organization, those people that are just churning and burning and they love their job and they have no desire to do anything different, that's the majority of your organization. You've got to give them focus as well, not just the top 10 that want to run the world.
Yep.
And my personal philosophy is you've got to give effort across the board, where a lot of organizations will only focus on that top 10
Mhm.
and you lose, you start getting churn for those
Yeah.
people that are actually running your business
Right. The core.
and helping
Core.
you make money. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's almost like before doing, any kind of talent assessment or analysis, 9 box, whatever we want to use,
Yeah.
assess
Yeah.
the desire. Do they get it? Do they want it? Can they do it? Not just can they do
Yeah.
it? Like
Yeah.
if they don't want
Yeah.
it, then
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
ram them in there. And we could do a whole nother discussion on this because now we could bring in a
Oh,
little bit of
sure.
like self-awareness of individuals. Like if people don't know themselves, they might think I want to keep climbing to the top instead of
Yeah.
remaining at a certain level and being a top tier individual
Yeah.
contributor. That takes a little bit of
Yeah.
reflection on their own as well.
Sure.
And I've seen, and
Yeah.
I'm sure
The
you've seen people, I want to be the boss or the leader or the director. Not only are
Yeah.
they not cut out for it, they're quite bad at it when they get there.
I've had 2 different types of conversations with folks. One is I want to be a people manager. And I'm like, well, why do you want to be a people manager? Because they see that as the next step up, the promotional opportunity. And I've worked hard in the organizations and businesses that I've been in to ensure that we have found a way to design an individual contributor path to growth, right? You
Excellent.
don't have to be a people manager to grow in your career. There is individual contributor type jobs that you should be able to continue to grow and get rewarded in without taking on people manager.
Right.
Because what happens is you take one or two people and you stick them under there. They're not really managing them.
Yep.
They're not developing them. It was just a title. That's one. Some of the best talent discussions I've had with people are those who have come to me, and I've had them with folks on my own team that say, I don't want your job. I know I don't want your job. I want to run leadership and development, and that is my wheelhouse, and that's where I want to stay. And I know going to your job would take me out of that. And that is, like you were saying, it's the self-awareness. It's the desire. They still have desire for growth. They just want to grow in a different way.
Right.
Not everybody wants to or should want to run the world, as I say, because not everyone's going to get to do that, first of all. But two, not everyone's built for it.
And those are the types of conversations that all leaders should be having, but that top tier HR leaders are having. And regardless of the size of the organization, it's not just having the talent, retaining the talent, but Nichole mentioned that third word, which was develop. We've got to develop the talent, but she added this new criterion of desire. They have to have a desire to be developed as well. Well, we can keep going. I want to make sure I honor your time. Let's end with this. Give the audience an action opportunity. Like where do you want them to take action to either learn or to continue thinking? Like, what do you got?
I would, well, I'll give you an action as an individual, right? As an employee, and I'll give you an action as a manager.
Perfect.
If, everybody's an employee, it doesn't matter how senior you are, you're an employee. Figure out what you want to do, right? What's your path look like? If you could draw it, what's it look like? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And really, really think about it. Like, what does it mean to go to the next level? What's it mean in your career? Maybe that's compensation, right? But does it take away from your family? Does it add travel? Like all that, you have to look at your entire ecosystem and what that means for it, right? People miss that sometimes. And if you're a manager, I challenge you and to have these conversations with your folks, right? Take one of your one-on-ones a month and only have this conversation with your folks. What do they want to do? How do they feel that they're doing? And how can you help them get there? It may not all be in your control, but if you know what it is, then you can advocate on their behalf with the people who can help get them there. And I think, don't forget yourself as an employee, but as a manager, you have that, real opportunity to help your folks get there.
Excellent advice. Well, Nichole, thank you so much for your time.
You got it.
The last thing I'll say is, based on this conversation, not only is HR not worried about should we be at the table, but we are at their table, especially when it's folks like Nichole. I mean, this whole conversation was about strategy, adding value. She talked about risk. These are things not traditionally associated with HR, but as she talked about, it's transitioning to exactly that. So if you're a business owner, leader, or even an employee, take note and think about, is our HR bringing these things to the table? Because if not, it certainly can be. So thanks again for your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Zach. Enjoyed it.